Asia's rolling out the red carpet. The king's arrived, and every stop looks like a coronation. President Trump's Asia tour began in Kuala Lumpur, setting the tone for a week-long trip that will culminate in South Korea at the APEC summit. There's been lavish ceremonies, cultural performances, even Nobel Peace Prize talk again. And all of this is part of Asia's charm offensive towards Washington. And perhaps they're being wise, because Trump might be around for quite some time. Back home, his former strategist Steve Bannon told The Economist in an interview that Trump could run again in 2028. It's a constitutional impossibility, but a political message all the same. Trump's dominance isn't ending anytime soon. Trump has toyed publicly with the idea on many occasions since he won his re-election in 2024. And this is despite the fact that the 22nd Amendment of the US Constitution forbids a president from seeking re-election for the office for more than 2 4-year terms, regardless of whether these terms were consecutive or not. En route to Japan, when asked about the idea, Trump teased and said, "I would love to do it. I have my best numbers ever. It's very terrible. I have my best numbers."
I would love to do it. I have my best numbers ever. It's very terrible. I have my best numbers. If you read it.
He did, however, clearly rule out running as a vice president in a Vance team, saying that the American public would not find it cute. Now, that confidence is spilling into the markets. Global stocks jumped on the news of a potential US-China trade talk and Trump's Asia tour. All 3 major US indices rose on optimism ahead of President Donald Trump's planned meeting with China's top leader, President Xi Jinping, later this week on Thursday morning Asia time, on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit, the APEC summit. The Dow was up over 0.7%, while the S&P 500 went up by 1.2%, and the Nasdaq popped 1.9%. The Japanese stock index Nikkei was over 50,000 for the first time, and China's own Shanghai Composite Index touched a 10-year high, with the Nasdaq-like Chinex Index up 1.5%. Rare earth stocks that surged when China first imposed their export controls are now tumbling as the markets bet that the US and China may ease tensions, and with them, the flow of government subsidies that fuel those gains. MP Materials is one of the stocks that the United States government invested in. It's down 24% already this week. Stocks have yo-yoed ever since the tariff wars have begun. Kuala Lumpur was more than Trump's first stop, though. It was the stage, as the Wall Street Journal described them, as the 5th high-level talks between the world's 2 superpowers this year. Now, the use of the word superpowers is very interesting, and it indicates the growing realization amongst the United States' own establishment that China has to be treated as a superpower that it is. Something that very recently the Singaporean Prime Minister, in an interview to the Financial Times, also advised Western powers to accept this fact.
That China is not just a rising power, it is a risen power.
It's clear that President Xi has thrown out China's traditional diplomatic playbook, and he's tailored a specific one now for Donald Trump. Unlike Trump's first term, the Chinese leader's reactions to trade assaults are no longer proportional. He's now punching back even harder, and it's working. Yet if you remember just a few months ago, in April, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, said that China's tariffs against the United States were a losing hand for them because the US imports much more from them than it exports. Later that month, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt also said,
"China needs to make a deal with us. We don't have to make a deal with them. China wants what we have, the American consumer."
Well, we know that's not true any longer. China has hit back hard, and it's found its trump card, and it's really hurt the United States. There is now a new Chinese strategy at play, which understands that Trump views himself more as a master dealmaker than an ideologue. So they're going to offer concessions on high visibility issues that he personally cares about, such as give him that win on that popular video sharing app TikTok, which President Xi can't care less about and has supposedly described it as a spiritual opium. Do watch to the end to see where I think the wins will be for both countries on the different issues at play. Briefly first, though, on Trump's trip to Asia, what he achieved there and what we should be looking out for that widely awaited Trump and Xi summit in South Korea. Asia feted Trump in a way he loves. Anwar Ibrahim, Malaysia's Prime Minister, awaited the president at the bottom of the stairs alongside troops and dozens of dancers. Trump even joined in with the festivities, pumping his fists and swaying to the rhythm of the music, and even waving the Malaysian and the United States flags himself. His dance moves have gone viral ever since he moved to the beats of the YMCA last year. Now, the president welcomed Anwar also into his presidential limousine, which is known as the Beast, before they both sped off together to the summit of the Association of the Southeast Asian Nations here in Kuala Lumpur at the time. He had done the same with Putin during the Alaska summit as well, which had tongues wagging and whispering at the same time. During Anwar's speech, he lauded Trump for your tenacity and your courage, as he put it. Now, there's a hospitality arms race going on, with every country now feeling that pressure that they have to orchestrate a lavish event that rivals or surpasses the last country that Trump visits. So far, the British have won. When Donald Trump visited London last month, his host pulled out all the stops. We had King Charles III, Prince William, and more than 1,500 soldiers welcoming Trump to the Windsor Castle, that 1,000-year-old residence of the British monarchy. Trump and the First Lady were also treated to a ride in a horse-drawn carriage, and an aerial display was put on by the Royal Air Force jets, as well as a lavish state banquet. Trump, it's believed, especially went to the ASEAN summit so that he could strengthen further his case for the Nobel Prize, wanting the Norwegian Prize Committee to see images of him signing the peace deal between Cambodia and Thailand. The smart Cambodian Prime Minister, Hun Manet, said that Trump deserved the Nobel Prize. Now, Cambodia and Thailand clashed for 5 days in July over a long-running, century-old border dispute. But Trump threatened to suspend tariff relief if they didn't reach a ceasefire, and he pressurized basically the two countries' leaders into talks which were mediated by Malaysia. Trump counts this as one of the 8 wars that he has now declared that he has stopped, the latest being the Hamas-Israel conflict. After the signing of the agreement, Thailand's Foreign Minister, Sihasak, said that the deal wasn't actually a peace treaty, but rather that the leaders signed a joint declaration on the outcomes of their meeting. He described it as being a pathway towards peace. Now, Sihasak, it seems, wants to join that same excommunicated camp that Indian Prime Minister Modi is in, who also said that the agreement wasn't the result of third-party mediation, in an obvious reference to the US. The US entered into trade agreements with Malaysia and Cambodia that will see the Southeast Asian nations lowering their tariffs and regulations on US goods, such as vehicle products and farm products. The two deals represent some of the most detailed so far that we've seen in Trump's second term. The administration has also said that the two countries would also buy more US goods in exchange for certain exemptions from Trump's reciprocal tariffs, which will remain at 19% though. The countries will also purchase new Boeing aircraft, and Malaysia will invest $70 billion in the United States over the next 10 years. Boeing, it seems, is a major beneficiary of most of the trade deals done so far. Each deal involving Boeing jet, typically worth billions of dollars, immediately improves the US trade balance, and it makes, importantly, newspaper headlines, something which every administration wants to showcase. In 2017, China also agreed to buy $37 billion worth of Boeing planes during Trump's visit. Now, in April this year, China stopped its airlines from buying Boeing jets as part of the tit-for-tat with the United States after it imposed those tariffs on Liberation Day, April the 2nd. The US also signed framework agreements with Thailand and Vietnam that could provide the foundation for a fuller trade deal later on. But initial agreements seem to be similar to those along the lines of the Malaysians and Cambodians. In general, the United States won't charge tariffs on many agricultural products and other goods not produced in the United States that arrive from those countries. The Southeast Asian countries also agreed to facilitate the United States access to critical minerals and not impose regulations or fines that target US tech companies. They also agreed to prevent companies from other countries, such as China, from exporting to the US at below market prices. And they will strengthen their environmental and labor regulations as well, according to these deals. Now remember, those are important because they help to increase the cost of doing business in those countries, which is exactly what the United States and the European nations want. The highlight of this week and Trump's Asia trip will be that summit meeting between him and President Xi. Trump, en route to Malaysia, said he hoped to leave the Xi meeting with a complete deal, saying that we have a really good chance of making a really comprehensive deal. The preparatory talks between the US and Chinese teams concluded harmoniously, as you would expect, because there's that anticipated meeting happening. Their job was to reach agreement on many issues as they possibly could. Now, they also made sure that Howard Lutnick, that loudmouth US Commerce Secretary, was not in that meeting, because he was blamed for that 50% subsidiary rule that came out of nowhere and almost collapsed the trade talks between the two countries, and that summit meeting that was really wanted by Trump as well as Xi. He's also annoyed India as well with those denigrating comments that he made on that country, saying that in the month or 2 months, India will be on the table and saying sorry. After these talks, the Chinese Vice Commerce Minister Li Zhengang told reporters that the two sides have reached a preliminary consensus on possible solutions. I think we have a very successful framework for the leaders to discuss on Thursday, he said. The talks covered a range of issues, including export controls, extensions to the suspension of reciprocal tariffs, cooperation to tackle the illicit trade in fentanyl. They also discussed purchases of agricultural products, access to rare earths, crucial to making everything, as we know, from cars to jet fighters, TikTok came up on the agenda, and the overall US-China relationship. Now, neither side has offered specifics. Obviously, they want to make a big splash after the meeting between the two leaders. But remember, before the Malaysia trade talks, both sides made moves to build up leverage deliberately. So how much rollback will there actually be on? Well, some assumptions can be made. First, the trade truce that was set to expire November the 10th, during which both countries kept those lower tariffs, that's going to definitely be extended if they want to conclude the deal, which of course they are. Besant have more or less confirmed that the additional 100% tariffs that Trump threatened China after they did the rare earth export curbs is definitely off the table. The president has said that he would press China to resume purchases of US soybeans. Now, these we know are very important for him. China this year has pulled back on its purchases of US soybeans. The imports of that crop from the United States, which is imported by China, has basically gone down to zero and has badly squeezed American farmers who are a core constituency of the president. The Chinese will for sure accede on this. They need the agricultural products anyway. Now, without these imports, China potentially could be facing a soybean shortage in a few months' time when supplies from South America dry up before the new crop comes onto the market there in April. However, they'd deliberately been waiting anyway. They were intending to use it as a leverage for the American team during these discussions. Soybean futures prices climbed up over 2% on Monday after Treasury Secretary said that the initial talks led to an agreement that China will buy a substantial amount. The other important win for the US and relatively easy delivery for Beijing is to help the US control those precursor chemicals that are fueling the fentanyl epidemic in the country. Now, they've already taken some action on this. The fentanyl tariffs are up to 20% of the tariffs, on top of the reciprocal tariffs of 34%. Whether the US will immediately move these 20% on the Chinese president's promise that he'll do further action, or will they wait to see the impact of their actions, is up in the air. Trump may decide to do it immediately as part of making China happy. For the Chinese, these tariffs have really irritated them, and they've asked repeatedly that they should be removed. The US last week also opened a new investigation looking into how the Chinese government upheld its part of the so-called Phase 1 trade deal that was signed during Trump's first term in 2020. Now, China's already said that it did fulfill its part of the bargain and that COVID was the reason why it may have not have been totally fulfilled. What's likely to happen is that Chinese buying soybeans and other agricultural goods, plus let's expect another round of Boeing's jet orders bundled in, which is the White House's favorite trade headline. So don't be surprised if this particular investigation just kind of falls off the agenda and disappears after a while. Now, at the end of September, Washington expanded a trade blacklist that targeted Chinese tech companies and extended those restrictions on tech sales to any company that is at least half or 50% owned by an already blacklisted Chinese entity. So are they going to roll back on these? Well, that is up in the air for sure. The reality is, despite any deal-making tendencies that President Trump himself has, the US and China are still online for a geopolitical clash when it comes to what most of DC is thinking. So this might be a bit of a tough one. Now, Beijing's trump card is the rare earths. After the US expanded its tech sales entities ban list, China's Ministry of Commerce tightened controls on rare earths on October the 9th. It unveiled those broad restrictions on exports of rare earth materials that threatened to basically upend all global production of everything from phones, laptops, and cars to missiles. And under those new rules, any global product that contained more than 0.1% China-sourced rare earth needs export approval from Beijing. Now, China, we know, produces around 90% of the world's refined rare earths and will do in the foreseeable future. So will it roll back on these? There's a lot of international pressure on China to do so, and the chances are that it may suspend these for a short period while setting the conditions of what would cause them to curtail the critical minerals again. Beijing's introduction of these rare earth export controls earlier this year led to significant production disruptions for US car makers and other companies. Now, the Trump administration expects China to increase exports of rare earth magnets as a condition for the US to lower tariffs. So when the two presidents meet this week, expect headlines about soybeans and Boeing. But remember, the real power still lies with the minerals. I'm Najma Minhas with GVS Deep Dive. Share with me your thoughts below on who's really winning this new trade diplomacy. Have a great day.